Hi everyone, grab a blanket, get cozy, and settle in, because for the next hour, I'll be telling you true crime cases from the last 5 years. And instead of boring you with my intro, I'll just start with the first one, from 2020, about a boy named Emrik Osuna. He was only 9 years old when his life was taken away after years of pain and abuse. Emrik was born on October 16, 2010, to Cecile Lucero and Emrik Osuna. He was a bright child who loved grilled cheese sandwiches, transformers, ninjas, and putting things together. He had a big smile and a personality that could light up a room. But sadly, most of his short life was filled with suffering. His birth mother, Cecile, was abusive. In 2017, one of her young children was taken to the hospital unconscious. At first, Cecile said it was an accident, but later she admitted she had slammed her daughter's head into a bed frame out of anger. When police went to her home, they found her other children, including Emrik, also hurt and neglected. Cecile later pled guilty to abuse and went to prison. After that, Emrik went to live with his aunt for a short time, but in 2019 his father Eric gained full custody, even though he had not been very present in Emrik's life. Moving in with his father turned out to be the worst thing for Emrik, because he now lived with his stepmother, Monique Osuna. Monique turned out to be extremely cruel, and Eric allowed the abuse to continue. For almost 2 years, Emrik was trapped in what people later called a house of horrors. He was starved, beaten, forced to exercise for hours, and treated like he wasn't even human. While other children in the house were safe, Monique focused her anger and cruelty on Emrik alone. Much of the abuse was caught on a nanny cam that a friend had suggested they set up. The footage showed Monique yelling at Emrik, calling him names, hitting him with objects, and making him do endless exercises. Sometimes he had to do jumping jacks or wall sits for 12 to 20 hours a day, even when he was weak and hungry. He was often denied food, while the rest of the family ate fast food in front of him. If he got anything at all, it was usually only rice and water. He wasn't allowed to sleep in a bed. Instead, he lay on the living room floor or was locked in a closet without a blanket or pillow. He was sometimes forced to wear only a diaper, even though he was 9 years old. The videos also showed Monique threatening him, kicking him, and even hitting him with a frying pan or a belt. She once put a rubber band tightly around his private area, causing him terrible pain. She told him cruel things, like that she would make him eat his own waste. His father, Eric, never stepped in to protect him. On September 1st, 2020, Emrik collapsed after all the abuse. Instead of calling 911 right away, Eric and Monique texted friends because they were afraid of getting in trouble. Hours later, when Emrik was no longer breathing, they finally called for help. Emergency responders found Emrik bruised, starved, and weighing only 44 pounds. His little body had suffered too much, and he passed away at the hospital the next morning. Later, Monique admitted to hitting him less than 10 times on the day he died, as if that made things better. In 2022, she pled guilty to murder and other charges. Prosecutors agreed not to seek the death penalty. Eric was sentenced to life imprisonment for the murder of his son. The story of Emrik Osuna is heartbreaking. He was a bright, funny, and loving child, but instead of being protected, he was murdered by his own parents. On the night of March 3, 2021, 33-year-old Sarah Everard was walking home in London. She had just left a friend's house in Clapham around 9 p.m. Sarah planned to walk back to her home in Brixton, a trip that usually took about an hour. As she walked, she spoke with her boyfriend, Josh, on the phone for about 15 minutes. Their call ended at around 9:28 p.m. A short time later, Sarah vanished and never made it home. Sarah grew up in York, a city in the north of England. She was the youngest of 3 children. Her father worked as a professor at the university, and her mother worked for charities. At school, Sarah was well liked and known to be bright. She went on to Durham University, where she studied human geography. She focused on subjects such as climate change and how societies are shaped. After finishing university in 2008, Sarah moved to London. She worked in marketing and public relations, building a successful career. By early 2021, she had just started a new role as a group account director at a digital media agency. She was living in Brixton, a lively area popular with young professionals. On that March evening, she was simply walking home after dinner with friends. When Sarah did not return home or meet her boyfriend as planned, her loved ones quickly grew worried. On March 4th, around 8 p.m., she was reported missing. Police began searching the routes she might have taken. Officers went door to door, checked CCTV cameras, and asked the public for information. Because this was during a COVID-19 lockdown, the streets had been quiet, which made it easier to trace movements on video. Soon, CCTV showed Sarah on Poinders Road, talking to a man near a white Vauxhall Astra with its hazard lights flashing. That was the last sighting of her. A witness later reported seeing the man arrest Sarah, handcuff her, and put her into the car. The car had been rented in Dover, southeast of London. It was traced back to Wayne Couzens, a 48-year-old Metropolitan Police officer. Wayne was married with 2 children and lived in Kent. He had joined the police later in life, after working as a mechanic and serving in the Army Reserves. In 2021, he was working in armed diplomatic protection, guarding embassies in London. But Wayne had a dark history. He had been linked to incidents of indecent exposure in the past, though these were not properly investigated. Some colleagues even gave him the disturbing nickname, the Rapist. Investigators discovered Wayne had carefully planned what he did. Days before Sarah disappeared, he rented the car, bought carpet protector, and ordered a handcuff key. On March 3rd, after finishing a 12-hour shift at the U.S. Embassy, Wayne drove the rental car back into London. Sarah, after dinner with her friends, was walking home. Wayne stopped her while wearing his police belt. He falsely told her she was breaking COVID rules and arrested her. At the time, restrictions were strict and people were used to confusing changes. Sarah, never having been in trouble, trusted that he was a real officer. Instead of taking her to a station, Wayne drove her out of London to Kent. There, he assaulted her and strangled her with his police belt. He then hid her body in a woodland area near Ashford. Over the next days, Wayne tried to act normal. He returned the rental car, bought food and coffee, and even booked a vet appointment for his dog. He burned Sarah's body, placed the remains in bags, and hid them in the woods. Shockingly, he even brought his family to the same woodland for a day out. On March 9th, just 6 days after Sarah disappeared, police arrested Wayne at his home. At first, he denied knowing anything about Sarah. Then he invented a story about being forced by a gang to hand her over. His lies were quickly disproven. The next day, police searching woodland in Kent discovered human remains. These were confirmed to be Sarah Everard. Wayne Couzens was charged with kidnap, assault, and murder. In September 2021, he pleaded guilty. He was sentenced to a whole life term, meaning he will never be released from prison. Idaho College Murders 2022. Brian Christopher Koberger was born on November 21, 1994 in Albrightsville, Pennsylvania. He finished high school in 2013. As a teenager, he sometimes wrote online about his mental health struggles. He said he often felt no emotions, felt disconnected from the world, and had little sense of guilt. He admitted to feeling depressed and once told a friend that he had used heroin in the past. Brian's main life goal was to work with criminals and study them. In 2018, he earned an associate's degree in psychology from a community college. He worked as a security guard in a local school district. In 2020, he earned a bachelor's degree in psychology, and in 2022, he completed a master's degree in criminal justice. Later that year, he moved to Pullman, Washington to study for a PhD in criminology at Washington State University. He was also hired as a teaching assistant, but he lost that job in December 2022 because of problems with his behavior and performance. On November 13, 2022, at almost noon, a student named Bethany Funk called 911 from her house on King Road in Moscow, Idaho. She was upset and said something had happened at the house. Another young woman took the phone and explained that one of their roommates was not waking up. Police went to the house, which had 3 floors and 6 bedrooms. Inside, they made a shocking discovery. 4 students had been stabbed to death. Madison Mogan, age 21. Kaylee Gonkovs, age 21, Xana Kernodle, age 20, Ethan Chapin, age 20. Madison and Xana lived in the house, along with Bethany and another roommate, Dylan Mortensen, who both survived. Kaylee had recently moved out but was visiting that night, and Ethan was Xana's boyfriend, who often stayed over. Police found Madison and Kaylee together in Madison's bedroom on the 3rd floor. Near them was a knife sheath made of leather. Xana and Ethan were found in Xana's bedroom on the 2nd floor. Investigators believed the killer came in through an unlocked sliding glass door on the 2nd floor. That night, all 6 young people had returned home before 2 a.m., and by 4 a.m., they were in their rooms. At 4:17 a.m., a security camera nearby recorded strange sounds and a loud thud. Around that time, Dylan heard noises and looked out of her room. On her 3rd look, she saw a man dressed in black, wearing a mask with bushy eyebrows. He left through the sliding glass door. Dylan locked herself in her room. Police later found video of a white Hyundai Elantra driving around the house several times that night. The car quickly sped away around 4:20 a.m. That same type of car was registered to Bryan Kohberger. Instead of arresting him right away, police followed him closely. Bryan drove across the country with his father, returning to Pennsylvania. He was pulled over in Indiana during the trip and finally reached his parents' home on December 16, 2022. On December 30th, he was arrested. He was charged with 4 counts of murder and 1 count of burglary. At first, his trial was set for August 11, 2025, in Boise, Idaho, and he could have faced the death penalty if convicted. But before the trial began, things changed. On June 30th, 2025, he reached a plea deal with prosecutors. He agreed to plead guilty to all charges, and in return, the state took the death penalty off the table. Just a few days later, on July 2nd, he officially entered his guilty plea in court. Then, on July 23rd, he was sentenced to 4 life sentences without the chance of parole for the murders, along with 10 more years for the burglary. The evidence against him had been strong from the start. Investigators found his DNA on a knife sheath left at the crime scene. His car was spotted near the house on the night of the killings. His phone records showed it had been in the area many times before. He also made troubling internet searches about serial killers, psychopaths, and violent fantasies. His defense had argued that eyewitness descriptions might not be reliable and that he had no personal connection to the victims, but the weight of the evidence was overwhelming. Now, as of September 2025, Bryan Kohberger is no longer awaiting trial. Instead, he is serving multiple life sentences in prison with no possibility of release. By taking the plea deal, he avoided the death penalty, but he will spend the rest of his life behind bars. Anna Walshe, 2023. This story begins back in 2016. An art buyer was browsing eBay, searching for rare treasures. To his surprise, he came across 2 Andy Warhol paintings listed for sale. These paintings were part of Warhol's Shadows series, created in the late 1970s. The seller was Brian Walshe, who claimed the paintings were real. He even showed what looked like paperwork and proof that the pieces were authentic. The buyer believed him. He agreed to pay Brian $80,000 for the 2 paintings. The money was sent to Brian's account, and soon after, Brian withdrew a large amount of it. But when the buyer finally received the paintings, something was wrong. The canvases and staples looked too new. The special stamps that prove authenticity were missing. The buyer realized he had been tricked. When confronted, Brian claimed he too had been scammed. He made excuses, saying he had bought the pieces years earlier in South Korea from an artist friend. But the truth was that Brian had become involved in art fraud. He had used fake paperwork, fake stamps, and poor quality copies to trick buyers out of huge amounts of money. Eventually, Brian was caught. In 2021, he was sentenced to nearly 3 years in prison and ordered to pay back almost $500,000. But by this time, his marriage to Anna Walshe was already under stress. Anna, who was born in Serbia and had moved to the United States, worried about her family's future. She and Brian had 3 young sons, and the thought of her husband going to prison made her fear for their lives. The couple's relationship grew more strained. Friends noticed the tension. Anna confided to some that she was worried about money and her children. Still, no one could have guessed how badly things would turn out. On New Year's Eve 2022, Brian and Anna celebrated with friends. After midnight, they returned home. Anna made several phone calls to her family and a close friend, but no one answered. Later, around 4 a.m. on January 1st, 2023, Anna was seen leaving the house according to the home's security system. After that, she vanished. For 2 days, no one heard from her. On January 4th, both her employer and Brian reported her missing. Brian told police she had left early for a work meeting in Washington, D.C., but records showed she never boarded her flight. Her credit cards and bank accounts had not been used since that morning. When police searched the Walshe home, they found blood in the basement and a broken, blood-stained knife. They also discovered that Brian had bought hundreds of dollars worth of cleaning supplies, including mops and tarps, right after Anna disappeared. At the same time, police learned that Anna had been having an affair in Washington, D.C. She had been planning to move there with her children and start a new life. She even spent the holidays with her lover. Investigators believe Brian may have found out. Soon, the case against Brian grew stronger. His computer revealed disturbing Google searches like how to dispose of a body and how long before a body starts to smell. Trash bags filled with blood-stained items and tools were later found along his travel route. Brian was arrested first for misleading police, then later charged with Anna's murder. Prosecutors say he killed her in their basement, made pieces of her, and disposed of the remains. Her body has never been found. Brian has pleaded not guilty and is being held without bail as he waits for his trial, which is set to begin on October 20th, 2025. Earlier this month, on September 11th, he was stabbed inside the Norfolk County Jail, but survived with only minor injuries, and that attack is now under investigation. Audrii Cunningham, 2024. Audrii Cunningham was only 11 years old when her life was taken in Livingston, Texas. On the morning of February 15, 2024, she was supposed to walk to her school bus stop like she always did. Neighbors were used to seeing her every morning. One neighbor said their dog always barked with excitement when Audrii passed by. But on that morning, the dog stayed quiet. Audrii never came, and people quickly realized something was very wrong. Audrii lived with her dad, Joshua Cunningham, and her grandmother. Her mom, Cassie Matthews, did not live with them. Behind the house, in a small camper, lived 42-year-old Don Stephen McDougal. He was supposed to be a family friend. Because Joshua often worked away from home on a boat, McDougal sometimes helped watch Audrii. He had been around the family for years, but what no one knew was just how dangerous he really was. That morning, McDougal admitted that Audrii got into his truck, but he gave mixed stories about what happened next. At first, he said he took her to school. Later, he claimed he dropped her off at the bus stop. Police quickly noticed that his answers did not make sense. McDougal had a long and troubling past. Years earlier, he was convicted of crimes involving children. He also had charges of assault and violence in his record. Somehow, he was not on the official offender registry. Police later said he even had swastika tattoos and possible ties to a hate group, though that was not fully proven. What made the case even stranger were the text messages McDougal sent to Cassie, Audrii's mother, the night before she went missing. In those texts, he tried to set up a meeting between Cassie and her daughter at a park. He told Cassie that Audrii wanted to see her, but he didn't want Cassie's fiancé to come. He wrote that Audrii didn't like him, even though she hardly knew him. He also called himself Audrii's favorite person and told Cassie the girl would not tell anyone about their talks. The words sounded manipulative, like someone trying to control a child. Cassie felt uneasy but hoped it might be a chance to finally see her daughter again. She later said she believed McDougal was setting her up. The next morning, McDougal texted Cassie again, saying he was taking Audrii to school, but Audrii never made it there. When she was reported missing, McDougal became the last person known to have seen her. Soon, her backpack was found near the Lake Livingston Dam. It was a heartbreaking sign. Police searched the area, and McDougal was brought there by investigators, but he never admitted what he had done. Days later, the truth came out. police discovered Audrey's body in the Trinity River. She had been tied to a large rock with rope. The medical examiner confirmed she died from blunt head trauma. It was officially ruled a homicide. McDougal was arrested and charged with capital murder. In court, he eventually pleaded guilty. He has now been sentenced to life in prison with no chance of parole. He will spend the rest of his life behind bars. For Audrey's family, the pain will never fully go away. She was a bright young girl with her whole future ahead of her, taken in the cruelest way. Travis Decker, 2025. Travis Caleb Decker was born on August 15, 1992 in Wenatchee, Washington. Wenatchee is a town of about 35,000 people, located around 148 miles east of Seattle. Travis served in the Army and spent time in Afghanistan. In 2021, he joined the Washington National Guard. Around 2015, Travis married a woman named Whitney. They had 3 daughters together: Peyton in 2016, Evelyn in 2017, and Olivia in 2019. But their marriage did not last. In 2023, Travis and Whitney divorced. At first, they agreed on a parenting plan that allowed both to share time with the girls. But soon, problems started to appear. Whitney grew worried because Travis lived a very unstable lifestyle. He often did not have a permanent place to live and stayed in motels, campgrounds, or in his white GMC pickup truck. In September 2024, Whitney went to court asking for the parenting plan to be changed. She said Travis was struggling with stability, and this was hurting their daughters. She also mentioned that Travis had serious mental health problems, including borderline personality disorder and narcissism, which had worsened after his Army service. Even so, Whitney said she wanted Travis to remain in the girls' lives. She admitted he loved them deeply and had sacrificed a lot for his country. She only wanted him to get better for their sake. There were a few incidents that made Whitney even more alarmed. In August 2023, one of the girls was found unconscious with a bathrobe tied around her neck at Travis's mother's home. He did not tell Whitney about it. Later, in December 2023, another daughter hurt her fingers when Travis was not paying attention. Because of these concerns, the court ordered Travis to be evaluated for anger management and domestic violence issues. He was also told to attend counseling twice a month. His visitation was restricted to specific hours every other weekend, and he was not allowed overnight visits. Travis argued against this, saying his daughters could learn from his lifestyle, but the judge disagreed. On Friday, May 30th, 2025, Travis picked up his 3 daughters for a scheduled visit. He was supposed to return them to Whitney by 10 p.m. that night, but he never did. By 11:34 p.m., Whitney reported him to police. She had tried calling him, but his phone went straight to voicemail. They later discovered his vehicle near Rock Island Campground, about 94 miles south of the Canadian border. Not far from the truck, officers found the bodies of his 3 daughters. They were just 9, 8, and 5 years old. They had plastic bags over their heads, and their wrists showed signs of being tied. Travis's dog was also at the site and was taken by the Humane Society. But Travis himself was missing. Police quickly issued a warrant for his arrest, charging him with 3 counts of aggravated murder and 3 counts of kidnapping. Investigators learned that just days before the crime, Travis had searched online about moving to Canada, relocating there, and finding jobs. They also found that he had not attended National Guard drills for about a year and was facing a disciplinary discharge. At the time of the crime, Travis was struggling with serious problems. He had been in 2 car accidents in May, was deeply in debt, and owed $20,000 in child support. His income had dropped sharply from past years. Despite everything, Whitney later said she did not believe Travis was a violent man at heart. She blamed the system for failing him, saying the lack of mental health support for veterans had cost her children their lives. Police believe they are closing in on him, but he has military training and survival skills, which may allow him to hide in the wilderness for a long time. Also, just today, there are more reports that maybe they found his remains, but it's not confirmed yet. Ahmaud Arbery was a 25-year-old black man who lived in Georgia. On February 23, 2020, he went out jogging in the Satilla Shores neighborhood in Brunswick. While jogging, he briefly went into a house that was under construction. Surveillance video showed him looking around inside for a few minutes. He did not damage anything or take anything, and then he left and continued jogging down the street. A 64-year-old man named Gregory McMichael saw Ahmaud running. Gregory was a former investigator for the district attorney's office. He believed that Ahmaud might have been responsible for burglaries in the neighborhood, especially at houses under construction. Gregory called his son, 34-year-old Travis McMichael, and the two decided to chase Ahmaud. They armed themselves with a revolver and a shotgun, got into their truck, and went after him. As they tried to catch up, Gregory climbed into the back of the truck and called 911. At the same time, another neighbor, 50-year-old William Roddy Bryan, joined the chase in his own truck. He recorded the entire event on his cell phone. Bryan tried to block Ahmaud with his truck and may have even hit him during the chase. The McMichaels soon caught up to him. Travis got out of the truck with his shotgun and confronted him. They shouted at him to stop, but he was unarmed and frightened, so he tried to defend himself. He and Travis struggled over the shotgun. During the fight, Travis fired 3 shots. The first hit Ahmaud in the wrist and chest, the second missed, and the third hit him under the arm. Ahmaud collapsed and died there on the street. Even though Gregory had a revolver, he did not fire, but both he and his son were heavily involved in the attack. At first, no one was arrested. The case was delayed for months, raising questions about whether local law enforcement was protecting the men. The video that Bryan recorded was later leaked to the media by Gregory McMichael's own lawyer, who thought it might help their case. Instead, it shocked the public and led to widespread outrage. Soon after, the McMichaels and Bryan were all arrested and charged with murder. At trial, the evidence showed that Ahmaud had not committed any crime. He did not steal anything, and he was unarmed. He was chased, trapped, and killed by armed men. In November 2021, the jury found Travis McMichael guilty of malice murder, 4 counts of felony murder, aggravated assault, and false imprisonment. Gregory McMichael was also found guilty of felony murder and other charges, though not of malice murder. William Bryan was found guilty of several counts of felony murder and aggravated assault, though not all charges. All 3 men were sentenced to life in prison. Gregory and Travis McMichael received life without parole, while Bryan was given life with the possibility of parole after 30 years. The evidence showed clear signs of racism, including racist messages on Bryan's phone and reports that Travis used a racial slur over Ahmaud's body. Many people believed that Ahmaud was targeted because he was a black man jogging through a mostly white neighborhood. The fact that the men were not arrested until the video became public showed how close they came to getting away with the crime. Gabby Petito was 22 years old, and Bryan Laundrie was 23. They were engaged and living with Bryan's parents in Northport, Florida. On July 2, 2021, after visiting Gabby's family in New York, the couple set out on a cross-country road trip in a Ford van. They wanted to share their journey on social media and traveled to places like national parks, showing what life was like on the road. During their trip, things were not always calm. On August 12th, in Moab, Utah, police responded to a report of domestic violence involving the couple. Neither Gabby nor Bryan was arrested, and they continued traveling. A few days later, on August 17th, Bryan flew back to Florida for several days before returning to Utah to meet Gabby again. Their trip then carried on as planned. On August 24th, Gabby and Bryan arrived at Grand Teton National Park in Wyoming. This was one of the last times Gabby was known to be alive. Sometime between August 27th and August 29th, Gabby was killed. She had been strangled and left in the park. On September 1st, Bryan returned to Northport, Florida, but he came back alone. He was driving the van that belonged to Gabby. 10 days later, on September 11th, Gabby's family reported her missing after they could not reach her. Only 2 days after that, Bryan also disappeared. A large search began for both Gabby and Bryan. On September 19th, Gabby's body was found in Grand Teton National Park, confirming the worst fears of her family and the public who had followed the case closely. Her death was ruled a homicide caused by strangulation. Meanwhile, Investigators searched for Brian. He was not charged with murder, but he was accused of illegally using Gabby's bank card to take money after her death. Even though the murder charge had not yet been filed, it was expected that more serious charges would come once he was found. On October 20th, human remains and some personal belongings were discovered in the Carlton Reserve, a large natural area in Florida near Brian's family home. The items found clearly belonged to Brian. The location had been underwater for some time earlier, which may have delayed the discovery. The very next day, October 21st, authorities confirmed that the remains were Brian's. They used dental records to make the identification. The story of Gabby Petito and Brian Laundrie captured national and international attention. Many people followed updates day by day as searches went on across different states. While many questions about what exactly happened in the final days may never be answered, the timeline of events shows how quickly things escalated. What began as a trip for excitement and discovery instead became one of the most widely covered true crime cases in recent years. Laken Riley, 2024. Laken Riley was born on January 10, 2002, in Marietta, Georgia. She grew up in Woodstock, Georgia, where she went to high school and graduated in 2020. After finishing school, she decided to become a nurse. She went on to study at Augusta University College of Nursing. For her program, she attended classes at the University of Georgia Health Science Campus in Athens, Georgia. The other person in this story is Jose Antonio Ibarra. He was born on January 5, 1998, in Venezuela. On September 8, 2022, he entered the United States illegally by crossing the border between Mexico and El Paso, Texas. He was arrested, but then released into the country. After that, he stayed for a while at a migrant shelter in New York City. In September 2023, Jose was arrested again for driving a scooter without a license. A child was on the scooter without a helmet. He was charged for driving without a license and for acting in a way that could harm a child. Later, Jose moved to Athens, Georgia, where he lived in an apartment on South Millage Avenue. In December 2023, Jose and his brother were arrested after police said they had stolen items from Walmart. Jose failed to appear in court for that case, and a warrant was issued for his arrest. On February 22, 2024, at 12:05 p.m., Laken's roommates reported her missing. Earlier that morning, Laken had gone for a run on a University of Georgia trail near Lake Herrick. At 12:38 p.m., her body was found in a wooded area about 64 feet off the trail. The cause of death was blunt force trauma and asphyxiation. At 9:06 a.m., Laken was seen running on the trail. At 9:10 a.m., her phone made a 911 call, but nothing was said and the call was disconnected. The operator called back twice, but there was no answer. Laken's smartwatch showed that her heart stopped at 9:28 a.m., suggesting the attack lasted about 18 minutes. Based on surveillance, witnesses, and other clues, police suspected Jose. He was arrested the next day. Less than 3 months later, on May 8, 2024, he was indicted on 10 charges, including malice murder, felony murder, and kidnapping. He chose to have a judge, not a jury, decide his case. His trial began on November 15, 2024. On November 20th, he was found guilty on all charges. He was sentenced to 2 life sentences without parole, plus 27 more years. The case quickly became political. Some people blamed President Joe Biden's immigration policies, saying Jose should not have been free in the United States. Others argued that the case was being used unfairly to attack immigrants. The evidence against Jose was strong. He lived close to where Laken was found. A man who looked like him was seen on video near the trail before the attack. A cup found near the crime scene had Jose's DNA. Laken's DNA was on a jacket he was seen throwing away. Her blood was on gloves he discarded, and his DNA was found under her fingernails. Her phone, which tried to call 911, had his thumbprint on it. When police later saw him, he had scratches on his body. Even though some argued there wasn't enough proof, the facts pointed strongly to his guilt. In the end, the court decided that Jose was guilty beyond any doubt. Laken's life was cut short in a terrible way, and Jose was held responsible for her death. Vanessa Guillen was a young woman with big dreams. She was born on September 30th, 1999, in Houston, Texas. Her parents, Rogelio and Gloria, had moved to the United States from Mexico to give their children a better life. Vanessa grew up as the second of 6 kids. She was smart, athletic, and very determined. At school, she was part of the gifted program, took advanced classes, and played both soccer and track. She also loved the gym and often called herself a gymholic. After high school, Vanessa decided she wanted to serve her country. She felt grateful for the opportunities her family had received and wanted to give back. Just 1 week after graduating in 2018, she left for basic training at Fort Jackson in South Carolina. She later trained at Fort Lee in Virginia, where she learned how to repair weapons and artillery. When her training was complete, she became a private first class and was stationed at Fort Hood, Texas, only a few hours from home. Vanessa worked hard, kept the armory in perfect order, and quickly earned a promotion to specialist. She was also engaged to her longtime boyfriend, Juan Cruz, who had proposed in March of 2020. From the outside, everything seemed to be going well. But her family began to notice changes in her. Vanessa eventually told her mother that a sergeant at Fort Hood had been harassing her. She was afraid to report it, fearing that she would not be believed or that she might face retaliation. Vanessa promised her mom she would handle it herself. On April 22, 2020, things took a tragic turn. That day, Vanessa's mother and sister, Myra, did not hear from her. This was unusual because Vanessa always stayed in touch with her family. By evening, Myra and Gloria drove 3 hours to Fort Hood to check on her. When they arrived, they were told Vanessa had gone missing after lunch. Her belongings, including her car keys, ID, and bank card, were still in the armory. Witnesses recalled seeing her go to another armory, which was run by specialist Aaron Robinson. Around the same time, Robinson was seen moving a heavy box out of the armory. At first, the Army did not treat her case with urgency. They seemed to think she might have just left on her own. But her family knew this was not like Vanessa. Slowly, search efforts grew. Other soldiers became worried, and soon, outside agencies like the FBI and Texas Rangers got involved. A reward was offered for information, and protests began at Fort Hood demanding answers. On June 30th, 2020, more than 2 months later, contractors found human remains near the Leon River, about 20 miles from Fort Hood. The body had been badly burned, taken apart, and partly buried under concrete. The remains were confirmed to be Vanessa. Investigators quickly turned to Aaron Robinson, the last person to see her alive. His phone records showed he had been near the Leon River the night Vanessa disappeared. When his girlfriend, Cecily Aguilar, was questioned, she at first lied, but later confessed. She revealed that Robinson had killed Vanessa in the armory with a hammer, then placed her body in a box. Cecily helped him try to burn and bury the body, and later cover it with concrete. Robinson was placed under watch but not officially arrested. On July 1st, 2020, as police closed in, he escaped and later took his own life before being captured. This left many questions unanswered, including the true reason why he killed Vanessa. Cecily Aguilar was later sentenced to 30 years in prison for her role in covering up the crime. Vanessa's death shocked the nation and shined a light on problems within the military, especially at Fort Hood. Many soldiers had reported harassment and assault, but their complaints were often ignored or dismissed. Her case led to investigations, protests, and eventually changes in the law. In late 2020, 14 Army leaders at Fort Hood were fired or suspended after it was found that the base allowed a culture where harassment and assault were common. In 2021, Texas passed the Vanessa Guillen Act, which gave soldiers a way to report harassment outside their chain of command. Later that year, President Joe Biden signed a law making sure assault cases in the military would be handled by independent investigators, not by a victim's supervisors. Despite these changes, many people wonder if enough has really improved. Reports of assault in the military remain high, and some families believe soldiers' deaths are still being covered up. Shanda Vander Ark was born in March 1979. She grew up in Norton Shores, Michigan, which is near Grand Rapids. Before moving there, she had also lived in Oklahoma. Shanda lived in a house on Marshall Road with her husband, Adam, her son, Paul Ferguson, and her youngest son, known only as G. She also had 3 other children who did not live with her. One of them was Timothy Ferguson, who lived with Shanda's ex-husband. In May 2021, Timothy, who was 15 at the time, moved in with Shanda. That meant there were now 5 people in the house. Timothy had autism, ADHD, and problems with movement. He did not go to a regular school but was taught at home. In January 2022, Adam had a stroke and moved out of the house. That left Shanda, Paul, Timothy, and G living together. Shanda later said that Timothy began to act out after Adam left. By the summer of 2022, Shanda was working as a law clerk and had just passed the bar exam, which meant she was close to becoming a lawyer. At that time, Paul was 19, Timothy was 15, and G was 7. On the morning of July 6, 2022, Shanda called 911 and said that Timothy was unresponsive. She told the police that Timothy had been on a hunger strike. When officers arrived, they found Timothy dead. He was extremely thin. The medical examiner said Timothy weighed only 69 pounds when he should have weighed around 132. His body showed clear signs of starvation and dehydration, and he had also been suffering from hypothermia. Police soon learned that Timothy's death was not an accident. Text messages between Shanda and Paul showed that Timothy had been treated very cruelly. He was forced to take ice baths, sometimes for many hours. Shanda locked the refrigerator and pantry so he could not get food. He was mostly given bread and very hot sauces, one of which was labeled Elijah's Extreme Regret, warning that the pain would be unbearable. At one point, Shanda even suggested putting the hot sauce on Timothy's private parts. Timothy's room was actually a closet under the basement stairs. It only had a tarp and a cardboard box. The closet smelled strongly of urine and waste because his access to the bathroom was restricted. The house had cameras, alarms, and motion sensors. Timothy was also sometimes tied with zip ties or handcuffs. Shanda and Paul even discussed ways to make him suffer, like forcing him to stand facing a wall for hours. Shanda often accused Timothy of pretending to be sick or weak. She insisted that he was choosing not to eat, even though she was the one preventing him from having food. Shortly before his death, he had been kept in an ice bath for about 9 hours. On the day he died, Shanda recorded herself dragging Timothy into the closet. She insulted him and called him pathetic. When she came back, Timothy was struggling to breathe. She told him he didn't need to breathe like that and called him a dummy. He died soon after. Both Shanda and Paul were arrested. Shanda was charged with murder and abuse. Paul was charged only with helping mistreat Timothy. He later agreed to testify against his mother. During the trial in December 2023, Paul explained how he followed Shanda's orders because he wanted to make her proud, even though he sometimes worried about Timothy's condition. Shanda testified in her own defense, saying she had no intent to harm Timothy and blaming Paul for some of the abuse. She claimed memory problems and said she was struggling with her own mental health, but the jury did not believe her. On December 15, 2023, she was found guilty of first-degree felony murder and first-degree abuse and was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole for the murder and child abuse in the starvation death of her 15-year-old son. In addition, she received an extra 50 to 100 years in prison for first-degree abuse. Rachel Morin, 2023. On August 5, 2023, 37-year-old Rachel Morin went for her usual evening walk on the MA&PA Heritage Trail in Bel Air, Maryland. Rachel was a dedicated fitness lover, often running races and lifting weights. She was also the proud mother of 5 children, full of faith, energy, and laughter. Friends and family remembered her as someone who always put her kids first and who had a special gift for bringing joy to others. That Saturday began like any other. Rachel and her boyfriend, Richard Tobin, went to the gym earlier in the day. Around 6 p.m., she drove to the trail for a walk. When she didn't come home and stopped answering calls, her children and Richard grew worried. By 11:23 p.m., Richard reported her missing to the Harford County Sheriff's Office. Police and volunteers searched the trail through the night. The next afternoon, a volunteer discovered Rachel's body near the path. Her death was quickly ruled a homicide, shocking the quiet community of Bel Air. At first, suspicion unfairly fell on Richard because of his criminal past, but he fully cooperated with investigators, handed over his phone and DNA, and was later cleared. The major breakthrough came from DNA evidence collected at the crime scene. At first, there were no matches, but soon investigators learned the same DNA had been found at a Los Angeles home invasion and assault earlier that year. Police released video of a shirtless man fleeing the LA crime scene, but his identity was still a mystery. For months, detectives worked with national databases and genetic genealogy tools to put a name to the DNA. Finally, in June 2024, authorities arrested Victor Martinez Hernandez, a man from El Salvador who had been living illegally in the U.S. His DNA matched both the Maryland and California crime scenes. Martinez Hernandez was charged with first-degree murder, assault, and other crimes connected to Rachel's death. The trial began in March 2025, and prosecutors laid out the brutal details. Rachel had been attacked, dragged into a culvert, beaten with rocks, strangled, and assaulted. They described a long trail of blood leading to where she was found. Witnesses included Rachel's family and her boyfriend. The defense tried to raise doubt, but the evidence, including DNA found throughout the crime scene, was overwhelming. In April 2025, the jury found Martinez Hernandez guilty on all charges. In August 2025, he was sentenced to life in prison without parole, plus additional consecutive life terms and decades more time. The judge called the crime unspeakably violent, and Rachel's family delivered emotional statements about their loss. Rachel's murder left a deep mark on Bel Air and beyond. Warren Barnes was born on May 19, 1951, in Colorado. He came from a large family and later had a daughter of his own. In his later years, Warren lived alone in Grand Junction. He told people that he used to be a cowboy in the mountains, and he enjoyed sharing that part of his life. Warren struggled with alcohol and sometimes with finding stable housing. Still, he insisted that he was not homeless. By 2021, Warren had steady work and rented a room in town. He did jobs like roofing and drywall. People nicknamed him the Reading Man because of how much he loved books. Sadly, Warren's life ended in a tragic way. Brian Cohee, who was born in 2002, also lived in Grand Junction. He lived with his mother, Terry, who ran a daycare out of her home called Terry's Toddlers. His father, also named Brian, was a carpenter and lived separately. Brian had many mental health struggles. He was diagnosed with autism spectrum disorder, ADHD, and depression. He was also very interested in serial killers and dark humor, which worried many people. His teachers even warned that he was at high risk of committing a violent crime and needed more treatment. Over the years, Brian got into trouble for assault, making threats, and inappropriate comments. On February 28, 2021, when he was 19, Brian drove his green Ford sedan into the Colorado River near a boat ramp around 2 a.m. Police and his parents came to help. The car was pulled from the water, and officers noticed blood on the bumper, but Brian claimed it was fake blood for theater. The police let him go home. The next day, Brian's father found a wallet in the car. It belonged to Warren Barnes. He called a work service listed inside, hoping to return it. This led one of Warren's friends to report him missing. That same day, Brian's mother called 911 after finding a human head in a plastic bag in Brian's closet. When police confronted him, Brian admitted to killing Warren with a knife. He was arrested immediately. At the station, Brian explained what happened. On the night of February 27th, he drove around wearing a Michael Myers mask and blue coveralls, carrying a knife, bat, and gloves. He found Warren sleeping outside near a footbridge. Brian stabbed him 30 to 40 times. When Warren asked why, Brian said, "I have wanted to do this for a long time." He then took Warren's head and hands and later dumped the body in the Colorado River. His car got stuck while trying to back into the water. Brian admitted he had been driving around for months, looking for a victim he thought police would not care about. He said killing was surprisingly easy and that he felt excited while doing it. He was charged with first-degree murder and other crimes. At trial in January 2023, Brian pleaded not guilty by reason of insanity. Mental health experts disagreed about his condition. Some said he had psychosis, while others believed he was simply violent and planned the crime carefully. In the end, the jury found him guilty of murder, tampering with a body, and tampering with evidence. He was sentenced to life in prison without parole, plus more than 13 years. Brian believed he would only serve about 15 years, but instead he will spend the rest of his life behind bars. Many experts believe that if he had not been caught, he may have tried to become a serial killer. He had already killed animals in the past and studied famous killers. However, his poor planning and reckless behavior made it unlikely that he could have gotten away with more murders. Karen Reed, 2022. Karen Reed was born around 1980 and grew up in Taunton, Massachusetts. After finishing high school in 2001, she went to Bentley University. There she earned a bachelor's degree in finance and later went on to complete both a master's degree and a PhD in finance from the same school. Karen worked in several jobs connected to finance. She was also a faculty member in the finance department at Bentley University. When Karen was in her 20s, she dated a man named John O'Keefe. Around 2020, the two reconnected and started dating again. Karen often stayed at John's house in Canton, Massachusetts, which is about 30 minutes south of Boston. John was a Boston police officer and lived with his niece, who was 14, and his nephew, who was 10. On January 29, 2022, police got a 911 call that John O'Keefe had been found lying in the snow outside 34 Fairview Road. There was a heavy snowstorm that night, and temperatures were extremely cold. When emergency responders arrived, they found John on the ground. He was not breathing and was very cold. He was taken to the hospital, where he was pronounced dead. Investigators said John had died from blunt force trauma and hypothermia. His skull was fractured, and the freezing weather made his condition worse. The night before, on January 28th, John and Karen had been at the Waterfall Bar and Grill in Canton with friends. Video cameras showed them arriving at 10:54 p.m. Karen was holding a drink, and according to witnesses, she seemed fine with John, with no arguing between them. Around closing time, the group was invited to the home of Brian Albert, a police officer, who lived at 34 Fairview Road. This was the same location where John's body was later found. John and Karen left the bar together at 12:11 a.m. Karen texted a friend, Jennifer McCabe, asking for directions to Brian Albert's house. Jennifer saw what looked like Karen's black SUV pulling up outside the home. Karen drove a black 2021 Lexus LX 570. Text messages between Jennifer and Karen around 12:30 a.m. suggest that Karen was directed to park on the left side of the property. Hours later, John's body was discovered in that exact area. In the early morning, Karen became worried when John did not return home. She asked John's niece to call Jennifer McCabe, saying she could not find him. Karen then met up with Jennifer and another friend, Carrie Roberts, to search for John. As they drove near Brian Albert's house, Karen suddenly said she saw John. She ran to him in the snow. His body was about 12 feet from the road. Carrie tried CPR, while Jennifer called 911. During the search, Karen told Jennifer maybe I hit him. She also pointed out that one of her SUV's taillights was cracked. Later, police found broken taillight pieces near John's body. Glass fragments were also found, which could have come from the cocktail glass John was holding when he left the bar. Police believe Karen accidentally struck John with her vehicle when she was intoxicated. Her blood alcohol level was estimated to be high. She was arrested and first charged with manslaughter and leaving the scene of an accident, but later the charges were upgraded to second-degree murder. However, the case is not simple. Some people, including Karen's defense team, believe she is being framed. They claim John may have been killed inside the house by someone else, possibly during a fight, and that police covered it up. The defense also points to strange details, like a Google search made on Jennifer McCabe's phone about how long to die in the cold at 2:27 a.m., hours before John's body was found. The state says the evidence clearly shows Karen's SUV hit John. The defense argues that the evidence was planted and that Karen never struck him. On June 18, 2025, a jury found her not guilty of the most serious charges, including second-degree murder, manslaughter while operating under the influence, and leaving the scene of an accident that caused death. However, she was found guilty of operating a vehicle under the influence. For that, she was sentenced to 1 year of probation, along with conditions such as treatment and a license suspension. Many people still remain divided about what happened the night John O'Keefe died. Some believe Karen was wrongly accused and framed, while others believe she may have been responsible, but the state failed to prove it beyond a reasonable doubt. Taylor Parker, 2020. Taylor Renee Parker was born on December 8, 1992, in New Boston, Texas, a small town west of Texarkana. Around 2010, she had a daughter, and in 2011, she married a man named Tommy. Together, they had a son in 2013. In 2014, Taylor had a sterilization procedure, and the following year she had a hysterectomy. Her marriage with Tommy soon fell apart. He accused her of cheating, and by 2018 they divorced. Taylor gave up custody of her son to Tommy and later owed more than $8,000 in child support. Just 11 days after the divorce, she married Hunter Parker, but that marriage ended in 2019. After leaving Hunter, Taylor went to a rodeo and met Wade Griffin, who worked as a roofing supervisor. They began dating, but Wade admitted he never truly loved her. Taylor, desperate to keep the relationship, began lying. She made up a story about buying a $4.5 million walnut farm. Wade stayed with her for a time, but the farm deal never happened. Later in 2019, Taylor started claiming she was pregnant. This was not the first time that she faked pregnancy. To make it seem real, she created fake ultrasounds, posted online about being pregnant, said she had morning sickness, and even wore a fake belly. She told people she was expecting a daughter named Clancy Gale. On October 9, 2020, Taylor was pulled over by police near DeKalb, Texas. She had a newborn in her lap with the umbilical cord still attached. She was taken to a hospital in Oklahoma, but the baby died a few hours later. At nearly the same time, police in New Boston received a 911 call. The caller was the mother of 21-year-old Reagan Hancock. She had gone to her daughter's home and found a horrific scene. Reagan had been stabbed over 100 times and was dead. Reagan had been 34 weeks pregnant, but her baby was gone. It quickly became clear that Taylor Parker had killed Reagan and taken her unborn child. At the hospital, doctors confirmed Taylor had not given birth. She later admitted to attacking Reagan. In 2022, she was convicted of murder and kidnapping and sentenced to death. Looking deeper into her past, Taylor had a long history of lying. She faked illnesses like strokes and multiple sclerosis, tricked doctors, and created countless false stories to keep men in her life. She also lied to welfare services for years about her pregnancy status, income, and household. Even in jail, Taylor continued her games. She demanded medical equipment she didn't need, tore her clothes to act seductive, and had relationships with other inmates. She claimed she had rich family land, oil money, and even a Netflix movie deal. At one point, she even offered to help the FBI solve murders. She also tried to create a false story for her case. She asked another inmate to lie and say she saw someone else commit the crime. The plan failed when the inmate told authorities. Her ex-boyfriend Wade testified about the many lies Taylor told him. She invented fake people, bank executives, lawyers, even a police officer, to make her stories believable. She created paperwork and excuses to cover her tracks. Wade admitted he believed her at the time. Sadly, Taylor's lies and manipulations grew worse over time. Before killing Reagan, she searched online about pregnancy, home births, and ways to fake being pregnant. She visited hospitals and stores where pregnant women might be. She even watched a video of a baby being born at 35 weeks, just like Reagan's stage of pregnancy. Experts who studied Taylor gave different opinions. Some said she showed traits of several personality disorders, such as narcissistic, borderline, histrionic, and antisocial. Others claimed she had no mental illness, but her actions showed she was manipulative, attention-seeking, and lacked empathy. Taylor killed an innocent young mother simply to continue her lies. She did not care about her victims. She cared only about keeping her fantasy alive.